Hello guys, welcome back. In this video, we will look at one of the basic iteration statements in Java, that is your for statement. So without wasting time, let's get started.
Now let us understand for iteration statement, which programmers often refer to as for loop. But before we understand for loop, let us understand loops in general. So the basic function of any loop is to allow a block of statement to be executed repeatedly. Right? So what do we mean by that? Now suppose that you want to print the statement 50 times, right? So how we can do that? So one of the simple ways is to, write the statement for 50 times, right? So if you write the statement 50 times, the output will be printed 50 times. But this is not the optimal solution, right? Because if we want to print the statement for 1000 times, then we need to write the print statement 1000 times. So this is where your loops come into picture, right? So using loops, and in this case we are using the for loop, right? So it will help iterate or repeatedly loop over the statements in the loop body. So now let us run this program and print the statement for 10 times, right? So let me clear this and run it. Now let us compile and execute it, right? So now let us run it and see the output. And as you see, we have 10 lines of output. The caffeinated programmer has printed 10 times. All right. Before we look at the for statement program, let us look at the syntax of the for statement. So your for loop consists of four parts. First is initialization, then we have the loop condition, followed by that you have your update expression, and finally your loop body, right? So now let us look at the program of for loop. Now let us understand the for statement in detail. So now if you compare the syntax of the for loop with this program, you will notice that this is your initialization. Then you have your loop condition. Finally, we have this update expression. And below that, inside the parentheses, you have your loop body. All right. So this is the basic structure of the for loop. Now let us understand each and every part of the basic for loop. So first is your initialization part, right? So here you usually initialize a loop variable that control the loop body. So as you can see, I have initialized an integer variable I with the value of 1. And this is also the starting point for any for loop. So once you have initialized your loop variable, then your program will look for the loop condition, right? And this condition must evaluate to a boolean. So if it evaluates to true, then your loop body will be executed. And if this condition evaluates to false, then the statements following your for loop will be executed. And now if I change the initialization value from 1 to 7, then your condition will become false and the loop body will not be executed. Now let me revert back to the original value. Now somewhere in the for loop, there needs to be a provision to update your loop variable, right? So here you have initialized your loop variable and there needs to be a provision to update your loop variable. You know why? Because if this condition is true, then your loop will run infinite times, right? Because this condition will remain true permanently, right? So your loop body will run infinite times. So this is where your update expression comes into picture. So after the execution of your loop body, then your update expression is executed. There is one thing you must notice in your for statement. That is your semicolon after the initialization and your condition expressions, right? And after your update expression, you don't have any semicolon. So the execution of your for loop is as follows. First, you initialize a loop variable.
then you check the condition, and if it evaluates to true, then your loop body is executed, right? And after that your update expression is executed, right? After the update expression is executed, then your condition is checked one more time, and if it evaluates to true, then your loop body is executed followed by your update expression, and this process goes on until the condition becomes false. Then the control of your program is passed from your for statement to your statement after the for loop, right? And if your condition is false initially, then your loop body and your update expression is not executed, right? Then your program will directly execute the statement after the for loop. All right, so let us understand this with the help of the modified program.
Now consider this modified program. So here what I've done is I've declared an integer variable I, and below that, in the for statement I've initialized the integer variable I with the value of 1, and after that I've used comma to write another statement in the initialization part. So what I've done is I've printed the statement only once. And in the update expression part, what I've done is I've printed and updated the loop variable at the same time, right? So before your first semicolon is your initialization part, and after your first semicolon and before your second semicolon is your condition part, and after that is your updation expression part, right? So now let me run this program and let us see the output. Now let us compile and execute the program. And as you see, we have the following lines of output. And as you see, your initialization part is executed only once. Then you have the loop body and the update expression part. And this is continued until the condition is false. That is, after the fifth iteration, your loop variable is updated to 6 and the condition becomes false. So the control of your program is transferred from the for statement to the next statement after the for loop. So you have this end of program as the output. And similarly, if I change this initialization variable from 1 to 6, then the condition becomes false, and you should have only two lines of output, that is only once and end of the program. So now let me run this. Now let me compile and execute it. And as you see, we just have only two lines of output. Now let us understand few more things about the basic for loop. So, here in this program, what I've done is, instead of the caffeinated programmer as the output, I've printed this loop variable I, right? So let me run this program. Now let me compile and execute the program. And here you see that your loop variable values are printed for each and every iteration. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on, right? But suppose you want to print it in the inverse order or the descending order. So how we can do that with the basic for loop? All right, so let us see this with the help of the program. So here what we can do is, instead of initializing the integer variable I with the value of 1, what I'll do is make it 5, right? And in the condition where I is less than equal to 5, what I'll do is I'll make this something like this: I greater than equal to 1, right? And instead of incrementing our values after each iteration, we will decrement the values. And now if I run this, the values will be printed in the descending order, right? So we have initialized with the value of 5, and then we check the condition. So 5 is greater than equal to 1, then your loop variable is printed, then it is decremented until the value becomes equal to 1. So now let me run this program. Now let me compile and execute it. And as you see, the values are printed in the descending order.
Next thing you need to know about the for statement is that you cannot write something like this in the initialization part. So if I write int j equals to 3, now after int I equals to 5, I'll get the compilation error. So let me run this program. So let me compile the program. Now as you see, we have the compilation error. And now in order to fix the compilation error, what we need to do is simply remove the data type, right? So we have this int I equals to 5 and int j equals to 3, right? So by default, the data type of j is integer, right? So now if I run this, the compilation error should be gone. So let me save this and run this. Now let me compile and execute it. And as you see, we don't have any compilation errors. And if I execute it, the proper output is displayed.
Now let us suppose instead of this integer variable j, I need to use char variable, so I write something like this: char j equals to uppercase a. And as you know, if I write this, any of the data type after your first data type, then you have the compilation error, right? So let me first run this. Now if I compile, I should have the compilation error, right? So let us fix this problem. So in such scenarios, what you need to do is you need to declare your variables outside the for statement. So I write something like this: int I, and below that what I do is I write char j, right? And here let me remove the data type from I and j, right? Let me add a semicolon. And now if I run this, the compilation error should be gone. So let me save this and run this. Now let me compile and execute it. And as you see, we don't have any compilation errors. And upon execution, the output is proper. All right. Next thing you need to know is your initialization statements cannot be mixed with the expression statements in the initialization section, right? So if I compile this, I'll get the compilation error. And now if I compile this program, I should get the compilation error. And as you see, we have the compile time error. So in order to fix the compilation error, because your declaration cannot be mixed with the expression statements, right? So what you need to do is you simply need to factor out all the declaration part. So what I'll do is I'll copy this, over here, and just remove the data type part in the for statement. And now if I run this, I should have the proper output, right? So let me run this. Now let me compile the program. And as you see, the compilation error is gone. Now let me execute it. And as you see, we have the proper output, the hello followed by your loop statements and then the end of the program statement. Next thing you need to know is that your update expression part can have multiple expression statements. So your each expression is separated by a comma, right? And last thing you need to know is that all the sections in for header are optional. So you can write just the initialization part or the condition part or the updation part, right? On you can write either of two parts, right? And the program will compile properly. And you should note that if you don't write the condition part, then by default it is considered as true and your program may execute infinite times. But the two semicolons should be present in the for header, otherwise your program will not compile. All right, so that is it for the today's video, and in the next video we will continue our discussion with the for statement. And please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I will see you until next time.